Are you looking to expand your aesthetic practice and attract high-quality new patients? Discover the power of digital marketing in growing your practice with a personalized strategy session. Schedule your meeting today by visiting www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM and take the first step towards transforming your practice with the potential of digital marketing.
Welcome to the Business of Aesthetics podcast. I am over the moon. Today we get to talk with Kelly Greytok of Private Nursing Care. Kelly, why don't you take a few minutes and introduce yourself for those of us that aren't so familiar with you, your business, your background?
Well, good morning. I'm just thrilled to be here with you. Thank you for having me. So I've been a nurse for a long time. I love being a nurse. One of the joys of my life. I've done a lot of different types of nursing, that's kind of the cool part about being a nurse. You can kind of bounce around and get to know what you like. And most of my background has been in trauma nursing or emergency room nursing. And then I've sprinkled in some kind of med surge post-op, hips and knees, fresh hips and knees, orthopedic surgeries, things like that. And then I did about a year and a half in home care, which I loved. And then I was just, I was looking, there's so many ways you can tell the story, right? I can
Yeah.
how far back can I go? But the one way I want to tell your audience is, I think we all get into medicine for a reason, and it's to help people. And so I had left, I kind of was done working in the emergency room, and I just really was looking for a change. And I had done mission work before, gone to Haiti and done mission trips. And then I went on a kind of a self-led mission trip to India, where I just kind of went by myself, and I had a destination, a school, and I just assessed some kids' eyes and teeth and things like that. And I came back from that trip and it just blew my mind. And so I really wanted to have more time to do those types of things. And, working at the hospital, I only had so much time off. You only have so much money, right? I think I went to India for like 9 days, which is a quick turnaround. So I really was looking to do something where I had more time off, I had more flexibility, I made more money, and still keeping in line with my favorite patients, And so I left the emergency room, started working in home care, which I loved. And I felt like looking over my whole nursing career, okay, what do I love? And felt like I had a very unique perspective with the kind of the marriage of right after surgery, healing at home. And I loved what people that had normal baseline great health.
Mhm.
That was fun. And so I was just kind of journaling and thinking, I'm a bit of a hippie. So I was thinking, what's possible? If anything's possible, I'm going to think of something. I'm going to think of something new that nobody's doing. And then I think I thought of it in 2018. And I thought, well, of course somebody's doing this, this concierge nursing. And my idea was, geez, I'm gonna take care of patients after plastic surgery, and I'm gonna handle everything. And I thought, oh, I'm sure people are doing this. And then I really couldn't find it, at least the way I had envisioned it. And then I just decided to do it. And let me pause and say, I've always been kind of a follower. I haven't been the type of person that goes out on my own, does things, without kind of looking at somebody else and saying, okay, how do we do this? And when I talked to a few people, and then I found nobody was really doing what I had in my mind, I thought, well, I'm just going to do what I have in my mind. And then started working as a home care nurse, which includes a lot of driving. And so listening to business podcasts, listening to podcasts from everything from selling to, inspirational things to your ideal customer, just everything. So that's kind of where the journey began.
So then walk us through granular details. Did you go down to part-time at the hospital and home care while you started, accruing your first patient on your own, like independently, or did you just cold turkey start? You talked about the financial freedom, but you took a little bit probably of a hit initially
Right.
to get things going. If you could walk us through kind of that transition state.
And it was stressful. And I think in hindsight, I look back and go, oh, I would have done things a little bit differently, right? But I also feel like when you put yourself in these situations, what is that saying? The magic happens on the thin branches. Have you ever heard
Mhm.
that? You know,
Yeah.
so I'm glad with how it worked out. But how it worked out is I worked as a home care nurse to full time, but that was how was that? I think 5 days a week, but you had a lot of flexibility. If all of a sudden you needed to take a call or I needed to do something, I could pause and do my charting later. So sometimes I would be charting late until the night because during the day I was, listening to a podcast or doing something like that. And of course, patient care, you're sprinkling in patient care all over the county. And so I had left the hospital. The home care agency was run by the hospital. So it was under the umbrella of the hospital business. And then it got to the point where I was working 5 days a week. So it's like, okay, when am I going to take these patients? And, you need to be I needed to be super flexible. So I went back to the hospital working per diem, which I still found tricky because I would, I'd get a random call. And at this point, I would just get more the panicked call.
Mhm.
The patient who shows up for surgery who says they have one, and now the staff is finding out they don't. And I'm getting sometimes even a panicked call from the surgeon, which is
Mhm.
always interesting. I mean, I would actually, these days, I would keep a suitcase in my car. And there were times when I would, all of a sudden, middle of the night, and I'm heading to, Palo Alto to recover some woman who the caregiver's just not meeting the needs, and the surgeon's like, "Can you help me?" And so I'm like, "Yes, I'm on my way."
Now, at that time, were those patients having plastic surgery, or was that like the whole gamut of post-op
This was
patients?
only plastic surgery.
Okay.
Every once in a while, I will do a hysterectomy or something orthopedic, but I'm private pay, so it's usually plastic surgery. So
Yeah.
yeah. So and then I was at the hospital and finding that I was turning down jobs to work my hospital shift, and that was stressful because I'm not one to just blanketly call in sick. And so it was just, this kind of like, what do I do? And I finally just jumped ship, left the hospital in 2019 and then went 4 months without a call, which was petrifying.
Okay, walk us through your headspace then. You're on this thin branch, you're waiting for the magic to happen, and you're like, what the hell?
Right. And first of all, let me point out, I'm not married. I'm paying my mortgage, and I've got kids and all that. And so it was very stressful. And I think more than even the money, it was more my proof of concept,
Hmm.
because of course, like all of us, we hear a lot of no's. And I definitely have had those moments. And so where there's self-doubt and who do I think I am? And, so, self-sabotage and all these, words you think, who am I to do this? How can I do this without a doctor? All these things that come up. And then I don't get not even a call, an email, nothing for 4 months. And so that was the river of misery, as some people call it, for sure.
So then how did you get your first patient?
So I should also say, so before this 4 months, the way I kind of marketed myself is I did a ton of research, I say in quotations, just kind of looking online, checking at websites, looking at lists. But I do geek out and see like which surgeons follow which surgeons. It's kind of fascinating. Um, and I sent out these beautiful folders to about almost 300 surgeons in California and Nevada. And in
Okay.
the folder was a letter. And first of all, the surgeons aren't seeing any of this. I'm very, it's rare that I get a surgeon that sees any of this. These are the patient care coordinators or the
Sure.
office managers, right? And so, but I also, I remember, it's kind of a funny story. I remember one day I was talking to my daughter, and she's 19 now, so this was probably 5 years ago. And I was telling her, I want to send something to where the surgeon or the office manager opens this and then they can click a button and see a video of me talking to them. And she goes, Mom, you need a QR code. And I was like, so I got a QR code. And of course, me, it has to be a lovely QR code. It's gold and it's got my logo in the middle. But it was a video. So the patient care coordinator, whoever would scan it, and a video of me would pop up, and it's me talking to them. and just kind of pitching myself and saying, here's why I think your patients would benefit from my care. So I did that to about 300 surgeons in Nevada and California. And so I was getting people reaching out, but I had people reaching out. And then that 4 months, right after I left the hospital. And I had a pad, but not that big of a pad. So that was a bit scary.
And then let's fast forward a few years to, what is your average month now? How many would you say you have about half of your time is spent intensely with patients during the recovery course, and your other half of the time is spent building the business and taking some time with visiting your kids and
Yeah. Well, I'm an empty nester now, so I have, and I'm working on my boundaries. So I definitely overwork. I try to take, I'm laughing because I'm like, I try not to take more than 2 patients a month. With that being said, for the next 4 months, I have like 3 patients a month. Um, I get those surgeons that are like, come on, please, do me a solid or whatever. Or I get patients that, and I love what I do. So it's very
Mhm.
easy for me to see a free week and think, oh, so
Yeah.
I will say, when I'm traveling out of California or Nevada, I will always fly in 2 days early, especially in the fall, winter, spring, just because with, the idea of me being late or my flight getting canceled, and that has happened, and I have enough time to get there on time. So it's a good chunk of time that I'm with patients. And then I spend a lot of time connecting with patients before they even have their surgery, which I think is part of what my patients love about working with me is I'm kind of like, I've got them. So, pep talks, I probably spent 3 hours yesterday talking to a few different patients about this or that, the details, the things that it's managing their anxiety about things.
And it's such an intimate part of their life. You are seeing them at potentially their most vulnerable before surgery, anxiety, during surgery, they are physically relying on you to be their like safety caregiver. After surgery, you're with them for, several days up to a week, it sounds like. And then afterwards, I'm sure that you remain a huge support system for people, several months after surgery. How do you juggle all of that?
I have one of the smartest things I did when starting the business is I created my kind of company values. And so I really go back to those. And so I'm just really authentic about, if I ever travel. So for example, last year I went to Vietnam and Cambodia and cycled through Vietnam and Cambodia. And before I left, I reached out to each one of my patients. I'm going to be out of the country. If I don't get back to you, here's why. And then, so I think I just really try to be super open about, if I don't get right back to you, means I'm with another patient, but I will get back to you. And so I just really kind of manage people's expectations, and I'm a big communicator. I also have kind of a tiered in order, because I don't have any staff. I don't have an assistant. Anytime you see anything from me, my weekly emails,
It's you.
it's me. And I want it that way. I don't want staff. I like to keep it easy. And I think that's been part of my success too. It's my voice. Because I did hire an advertising company for a little bit, and it just didn't go well, in the sense that I think people could
Mhm.
tell that it wasn't me. It didn't sound like me. So I think I'm
Mhm.
just really good at communicating. And then I have this kind of tiered system where I get back to people. My private patients come first, then somebody who has maybe purchased an ebook or something from me. I mean, I kind of will drop everything for those people. And then I get a lot of people reaching out after that. And I just can't respond to everyone. And that was really difficult for me, because I think I built a business on being accessible. So I think I
Mhm.
have better boundaries with that.
What are some of the things that patients can do before their surgery to help get their brain in the right space for the big emotional challenge that cosmetic surgery is?
I say be prepared. That's a very kind of blanket statement, but I think that whenever I'm talking to patients and telling them, hey, you're going to want to do this, you're going to want to do this, I realize that all of the things I'm telling them to do, it's all just to help them manage their mind going into surgery. It's all helping them achieve a feeling that's going to help them be more calm and confident going into surgery. And so it's interesting that I sell ebooks or courses that have, do this, set up your space, put these things on your nightstand. But all of these little things, it keeps them busy doing things that they're going to be like, okay, I've got this.
Yeah.
I think too, another thing, and I'm realizing this more and more lately, is the caregiver. I think that I always undervalued the importance of that person. And I think that person's role is huge, is just instrumental in them feeling good about things going into surgery and then afterwards. It's almost all on them after for a while.
If someone's getting ready to have surgery and they don't have a supportive caregiver, how do you prepare them for that lack of support? What are different tools? Because sometimes, I mean, even in my own practice, most people have some sort of cheerleader in their corner, but
Right.
there are people who just have been dealt a shitty hand
Yeah.
and, don't have a great spouse, or their adult children are very skeptical of them having the surgery. They're just kind of doing it alone. I mean, what
Right.
are some tools that you have seen those patients use and it be helpful?
Well, and you said something really important. A lot of times, not a lot of times, often I find people will choose someone who's kind of the default caregiver, and that person isn't really supportive of them having the surgery to begin with. And I don't even mean being negative, but just, you don't need that. It shouldn't matter, right? All that. So I think that, first of all, choosing the right person is important. Even choosing your friends or people that are supportive, even just to check up on you, somebody that's going to come in and know what they're walking into, be excited. And I think meal prepping is huge. I think that's a huge part of it. Meal prepping. I think the food,
Let,
yeah.
let's talk more about that, the importance of
Yeah.
food and meal prepping and
This is one of my biggest kind of cornerstones of just my practice and what I think is important. I find that people a lot of times, in order to manage that pre-surgery anxiety, will meal prep, and they will make the healthiest of the healthiest food, which is it does serve a purpose because they feel better about things, but often they don't eat any of that after. I think because of them not feeling their best, because of anesthesia, and they're totally out of it for the first 24 hours, they really default to comfort foods, which makes sense. So that's why I really recommend, and I cook for my patients, I handle all the food. But for people that, I'm not working with, I always like to try to motivate them to make something middle of the road, or almost take their comfort food and put a healthy spin on it. So when they do default to that, they know that they've bumped up the protein, they've cut back on the salt. I mean, those things really matter. So it just,
yeah, it's interesting. I have so many people that ask about all these like supplements. What can I do afterwards to help me, encourage my recovery and healing? And it's like we as a species are meant to consume our vitamins, minerals, macronutrients through our diet. Like that's the whole purpose of our gut.
yes.
And so I think often we overlook our diet and we put too much of an emphasis on supplements, but that's kind of my own little.
Well, I agree, but you know why? Ordering a supplement, you get the dopamine hit from buying it, and then you've got it, and all you have to do is open it and swallow it. It tastes a lot better than spinach or sautéed arugula, right? You
Yeah.
know, and
So
yeah.
do you have like nutrition and dietary training? Have you always been a good cook? Obviously you didn't learn any of that in nursing school.
I didn't. I became a nurse a little later in life, so I think I was no, and I would never say I'm a great cook. I think that I just keep it clean and basic. And it is amazing how many people these days don't make homemade soup. And so how it all came about, the soup story, is I was recovering a man in Northern California, and all of a sudden they called him and said, this is before I brought the food or anything. I would just show up and take care of the patient. And he called me in a panic and said, he had rented this Airbnb or something. And he's like, they're asking me to come early. I have, but I don't have any food. And I was like, go, I got you. And my son had not been feeling that great. So I'd made a batch of homemade chicken noodle soup. And so I brought it for him, and he was just wouldn't stop talking about it. And so then I was there with him. I Instacarted a bunch of stuff, and I made him a bunch of food for after I left. And it just was, all of a sudden I thought, oh, well, this is my main complaint in my mind of all my patients is everybody says they're a healthy eater. And, even myself, I think we all are a little unrealistic about how many fruits and vegetables and, high protein foods we're getting. And so I just really started bringing the soup, and now I do all the food. But if, bringing the soup, then I started making homemade applesauce, because especially I noticed, after anesthesia, they're not complaining about their facelift incisions. They're complaining about their throat.
Yeah.
Right. So I bought this applesauce, and then on accident, one time I freeze it, because you can freeze applesauce. I make it in my Instapot, and then I freeze it, and then I hadn't thawed it out in time. And so it was like really, really, really cold and crystally. Brilliant. So now I do that all the time. It's almost like it just is really soothing on the throat. So things like that. And patients love it. I think too, most of my patients are older women who are the caregivers. And so now I'm coming in and I'm, supplying all that. So
Let's shift and talk a little bit about pain. I think, pain post-operatively, I'm sure you would agree, it's this huge spectrum. Some people just swim so easily through the recovery and have very little pain. Some patients have pretty significant pain for, quite a while after surgery. Obviously, as a, healthcare provider, we're used to prescribing medications, but are there alternative ways to help with pain management that are not pharmacologic?
absolutely. And first, I want to mention the caffeine withdrawal headache. So whether a surgeon says no caffeine after surgery or not, I always try to get my patients to, if they're a caffeine drinker, especially coffee, wean off 2 weeks before, if they're not able to have it after or don't plan on having it after. Because a lot of times I find out that what we're dealing with afterwards is a caffeine withdrawal headache. And it's not even really incisional pain or surgical pain. We're dealing with that. And then, that can lead to vomiting. And so that's like mic drop number one. I think I'm a really big advocate of ice. And I will say, I should note that I follow surgeons' orders, to a T, because you all have very different orders. And part of my job is to support my patient in having faith in their surgeon. And so if I were to come in and say, well, we're not really going to do that, so that's just not ethical and not good for the patient. So even if the surgeon is like no ice because they're worried about blood flow and things like that, I still will use ice on other areas.
Okay.
So let's say they have a facelift and the surgeon says absolutely no ice. I'll still do ice at the back of the neck, ice on, high on the collarbones, even ice on the top of the head if they haven't had a rhinoplasty. So, you don't want it to fall on their head. But, if they've had any type of body work, ice on the lower back, ice below the incision, site. It's just distracting. And we're doing something.
Yeah.
Right. That too. It's a mental thing, because sometimes patients just need you to be doing something about it. A lot of it's mental. Yeah, I find mostly with the pain with facelifts, if they have fat transfer, the biggest pain is where that little harvest site, but you can pop an ice pack there, no problem. So the pain thing is interesting. And I have had patients and they're taking everything the doctor will give them for 5 days straight. And then I have many patients that I really try to get them to take a Tylenol, and they take a Tylenol for, a day, and then that's it.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest variability post-operatively is just how much discomfort patients are in, which is wild, because we're doing, essentially the same thing to them. But I think our pain perception is so different
I
from
agree.
individual.
I also think, I massage feet, I rub backs, how the old school nurses used to in the hospital. I also think it's human nature that when something hurts, we think something is wrong. And so for me to be right there and say, I'm sorry you're uncomfortable, but from my perspective, everything is exactly as it should be. And I think that, okay. And then I'll even say, if you could be a little bird on your surgeon's shoulder and see what just happened, this would all make sense. And then I think that they can wrap their head around it a little bit. There's always those patients that, they've had the works. And then they're like, I just don't know why, I don't know why this would be hurting. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I give them the line that like most everybody has had some degree of house construction. So I'm like, you are in the demo phase right now. Things are messy.
Yeah.
Things are irritating. Like you're not in your normal home right now. So you just got to give us time to heal and get everything cleaned up and pretty again, so to speak.
Right. And then let's talk about, is it pain or is it tightness or is it, or is it discomfort? I mean, some people, I'm a very big believer in the power of the mind. And I think if somebody thinks they're going to be in pain and expecting pain, they're going to find some pain, So that's why I talk a lot about that with my patients. And my patients, most of them would say, oh, wow, I can't believe how comfortable I am. So
I'm sure you get a lot of questions from patients about how to choose a surgeon. And I think that, there are so many phenomenal surgeons out there today, whether someone's getting a tummy tuck or face work. What kind of advice do you give patients on scheduling consultations? Like how many should they go on? How should they find their surgeon? And then what are some things that they should look for during that consultation process that would be red flags or green flags?
I probably get this question more than anything. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I never mention
Specific surgeons.
I
Yeah.
don't. Well, that was intentional very early on because I didn't want to get into that banter. And every once in a while, somebody on my Instagram page or something will say, check out this doctor, and I delete it because then you get the, oh no, my best friend, and my page, that is not what this is about. But it's a great question. And I used to say three different surgeons, three different consultations, but lately a lot of people, but they're so expensive. Consultations are so expensive. And so I still think this is an investment. My goodness. First off, let me start with saying this. It's important to know what is important to a person. So I have had patients fly in they don't even meet the surgeon. They don't have a Zoom. They don't have anything. They don't even meet the surgeon until right before surgery. I have patients that want the surgeon to grab their hand and say, I got you, this is going to be great. I have patients that really don't care at all about bedside manner. They don't care about staff. And so it's important to know what you want. For example, for me, I want to feel like everybody there is invested in me and has got my back, and I'm all about the warm fuzzies. And so that's important. And so when I say that to people, sometimes they go, oh, shoot, I don't care about this or that or whatever. So then that's important to know. Then I say, do your research, geek out on it. I mean, they're already on social media. See what you like, why you like it. I would always say, go to their website and then call. And here is, if there's any, for all the surgeons listening, here is the one thing I hear more than anything. It is so important, that person that answers the phone. It's almost, I have had countless people talk to countless people. Oh yeah, I picked the surgeon and they were great. But the girl, the staff, the front office, the girl who answered the phone, it's huge. It's a reflection on the surgeon for sure. So I even say, even if you're not sure about even wanting a consultation, call and say, hey, what's the process of scheduling a consultation, and see how that feels. And then as far as the consultation, I still say to have 3, even if you fall in love with the first consultation, having those other 2 will only, put that in concrete, make you feel better about it. And it just gives you just a different perspective. I'm trying to make sure I answered all your questions.
What kind of like red flags or green flags? And I do empathize with the patient because you have such a limited, even if you call a few times to kind of vet the
Right.
team, you have, even if you have like a pretty long consultation with the surgeon and you do meet their coordinator afterwards, like you
Yeah.
really have such a limited like exposure to them. And then it's this huge trust fall.
Right.
Like, how much should a patient's like research and knowledge go into picking a surgeon versus like their gut and intuition?
I'm a gut and intuition person, and so I default to that usually. But some people aren't really in tune to that. And and everything I just said, I'm reflecting on what I just told you, and this can get tricky because then they see reviews,
Hmm.
and you can find negative reviews about anybody and everybody. Um, you know, I wish I had the answer, and this is what part of the reason I don't help people with this, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
I just think that you have to educate yourself, and it has to feel good. I've had plastic surgery myself, and you have to think, oh, this makes sense. They're hearing me. I also think it's important that they tell you, I'm hearing what you're saying. Sounds like this is what you want. We can do that, and here's how we're going to do it. For example, I just had a rhinoplasty a few months ago, and I was very hesitant my whole life having it or for as long as I've wanted it, because I didn't want the standard rhinoplasty.
Yeah.
I really thought, well, this isn't for me. And then I thought, geez, I need to do what I'm telling all my patients and have some consultations. And so I didn't, and I even thought, well, this will just be research. This will be good for me to see. And I was surprised when I said, I want to keep some of the bump. I want to keep some of the thickness. And it was a huge conversation. Um, and, uh, and he's like, now, that's not how it normally goes. And I said, I know, and this is what I want. And I felt like together we made a plan. So that was important for me.
Yeah, it's a marriage in a sense
It's
for a while.
totally a marriage. And he wasn't trying to change my mind, or I think you're gonna, because a lot of patients, I think you're gonna regret this. Like I hear this from breast patients all the time, patients that have breast implants. You're gonna want to go bigger. You're gonna wish you had. And it's like, I think a lot of times people know themselves better than we give them credit for, and that's their call. So, but
Well,
it's a hard.
your nose looks amazing for only being a few months out.
Thank you.
Do you think that being a patient has made you a better provider?
Oh, absolutely.
How?
Absolutely. Well, because so I had my sister recover me. She's not a nurse. And I remember thinking this will be interesting to see how I do if I follow my own rules. And I remember there were a few times that I didn't want to follow all the things I say to do. I didn't want to eat. No one ever wants to eat. No one ever wants to eat, and I didn't want to eat. And I even said to my sister, I'm doing what I promised I wouldn't do. So I forced myself to eat, which I did great. And I think I did great because I really followed my plan. Um,
Hmm.
but yes, I think I think just that understanding of, oh yeah, I think I'm safer than I am. Patients always don't realize how just even the effects of all those medications and how they're really out of it for the first 24 hours. And I was out of it. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that made me more understanding.
Now we talked about, when you first started your business that you thought, of course, there's someone out there doing this. You looked around, you couldn't find anybody, and you had this like razor sharp vision of what you wanted to create for yourself, your business, the patients that you help take care of. When you run into challenges or hiccups, how do you navigate those? Not having like a solid path in front of you or like this mentor that's 20 years older than you that's been there, done that. How do you process different challenges that come up career-wise, business-wise, and then sometimes with patients, I would assume?
I always go back to my company values. And I think that anytime I have a decision to make, if I go back to those, it is very clear. So one thing that comes up a lot is my cancellation policy.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So this is, and of course I have a lawyer, and she's, no, you need to, have this well defined. So I have a contract, and it definitely mirrors most of the surgeons contracts that I've seen. But I have never not given someone their money back. Now, I'm not saying that anybody else needs to do this, but this is how I do it. You have to know too, by the time I meet my patient, other than especially these days, because I don't take a lot of last minute patients just because I'm booked out. But so by the time I meet my patient, I know their husband, I know their dog's name, I know who knows about the surgery, I know who doesn't, I know what their fears are, I know where they like to vacation. I mean, I'm like in it, right?
Mhm.
And so things come up. For example, I was on my way driving. This was when it was drivable, flyable, and I was driving. And so I think I was like 4 hours into the trip, and all of a sudden she calls me. She's like, oh my gosh, my daughter-in-law just went into labor, like way earlier than planned. And so as I'm talking to her, I turn the car around and just start heading back. And of course, and I think that, no, and she wasn't able to, and when she rescheduled, I wasn't available. And so I just refunded her. Now, technically, I don't give her if I'm honoring my contract, I don't give her the money back. But that's just not how I roll. And I believe it served me. And
Well,
go ahead.
and I also think sometimes if you set a firm boundary at the beginning, expectation wise, you're able to have the softness on the back end.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you had no contract, you probably wouldn't feel as comfortable refunding in these, one-off situations where someone's becoming a grandmother,
Right.
or God forbid they get sick before surgery or something like that.
Right. So that has served me well, just trying to just do the right thing. And there have been times when it costs me money.
Yeah.
But it is, I just believe in the positive energy about it. And it has served me well. As far as other hiccups, I mean, from a business perspective, there have been times early in my practice where, I get the call and someone's screaming at me, no one's ever going to pay you for this. This is ridiculous. People don't need this. How dare you? I mean, I've had those calls. And I mean, there's tears involved afterwards. I'll tell you that, and especially, I mean, now it doesn't even faze me. And I will tell you, interestingly enough, I remember before I had even technically launched the business, I had made my little brochure and I took it into my gynecologist, because I just adore him. And so I was like, he knew what I was doing, and I showed him. And he just said, Kelly, this is beautiful. But he said, I want you to be successful, and no one's going to pay for this, And I just said, well, I adore you as well. And I totally think you're wrong. And he laughed.
Yeah.
He goes, good, prove me wrong. But one of the things, have you ever heard of Grant Cardone? I'm not a huge fan, but he is just a big businessman. And he has a book called Sell or Be Sold or something like that. And that's one of, listening to podcasts and how to sell. And one of his kind of cornerstones of what he says is always agree. And so when this person was yelling at me, if no one's gonna, people don't need this, I said, you know what? I agree with you.
They don't need it.
People don't need it, but they want it.
It is a luxury service.
It is exactly. And I love it. And so I think just, doing the work to set myself up to realize that I am one person and there are a lot of people in this world, and I'm offering something really special. And I think in a world now where, with AI and people, everything is becoming more and more automated. It's these little niche situations, I think, that people value and they're willing to pay a lot of money for. And it's just, I mean, people will say, I'm the best money they spent, because I think that they want to feel cared for and loved, and like they don't have to worry about a thing. So that's been fun.
Yeah, I also heard a lot of no's. And for some reason, I just felt delusional enough that I was right.
So delusional. And I get so delusional. And I mean, and I was in the fetal position a few times, like, oh, this isn't gonna work. And then it's like, but so yeah, there's always, I mean, any success story has those moments. And it's funny because people don't know about those, but oh yeah, I've so many no's. And even now I get so many no's.
Yeah, which is okay. You got to have 10 no's to get your first yes.
For sure.
So let's talk a little bit about, I found you came across my For You page on TikTok.
Nice.
Talk about, you mentioned a little bit earlier about advertising, how you like to do it yourself. You feel it's more authentic. What are some of the ways that you've been successful in marketing yourself? Talk about social media, talk about your website. Do you still reach out to individual offices, like, your very first 300 mail parcels that went out?
Yeah. I don't reach out sometimes I'll reach out to a surgeon directly. But no, I don't reach out to offices anymore, mainly because I don't get the surgeon. I get the patient care coordinator or I get the front office person who's making minimum wage, and they're like, you do what? And it's, they don't even understand. It's so interesting. I have had a business coach most of my journey, which has been really helpful. And I was listening.
Now, how'd you find that business coach?
I think, my sister's an entrepreneur, and I think she put me in touch with that person.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've had a few, and they're great. And I was listening back to one of the calls the other night, and it was from like from 2019. And I was saying, I just I don't feel like I can go on Instagram. I'm just nervous. I'm nervous about, educating people or who am I? Or people, what will people say? Who does she think she is, and all that. The approach. So I thought that was so interesting because now I can, now I'm all over TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
I think my approach has always been educate and stay in my lane. I think
stay so niche to what you know.
Sure, because I find, and I don't really look around anymore what other people are. Actually, I've never really looked at what other people are doing, which has been also helpful because I really keep my own voice. But I think that my frustration with social media is, one person's an expert at this and now they're an expert at everything. It's like, don't ask me about lasers. I have no idea. I don't know. And I'm not going to pretend I do. So people ask me to recommend, what would you recommend? And it's like, that's not my wheelhouse. And I'm not going, just because now I've got this platform, I'm not going to pretend I know what I don't know. And I also, because I need to respect all the different surgeons, their beliefs about lay flat, lay elevated, ice, no ice. I always have to say, I always follow your surgeon's orders, but there's still a lot I can say in that, in the middle. And I say that. And so I educate. So I think that has been really helpful. And that has been why I have found success online, is I'm just sharing these little tips that I have found. And I didn't know this stuff years ago. I mean, this is stuff just from doing it and doing it and doing it. Oh, wow, this is an issue. I see this again and again and again. I also see a huge difference between the patients that do well and the patients that that don't do well. And
okay, let's pause on that and
yeah,
tell us more about that. What do you see? What are the different patterns?
So the first thing is food. And I don't see this much anymore because I have conversations about it with my patients. And I even say, I'm going to boss you around with love. And they're like, oh, they're what I'm going to say, because they want to feel good. But nobody wants to eat. And I feel like it trips a cascade of negative events. And also what happens with, I find the caregiver is and I hear this from women all the time. My husband, whoever, let me sleep for 8 hours. So they come home from surgery, they get in bed, and then they're out, and whoever's helping peeks in and they look peaceful. And so, my gosh, you don't want them in pain and they look peaceful. We're not going to kind of poke the bear. I poke the bear. I wake up gentle. Hey, let's have a few bites to eat. I know you don't want to breathe deep. Let's, all these things that you and I know are just basics, but to people, why would I want to breathe deep after a tummy tuck? People are like, what are you, crazy? And, but the main thing is food. Nobody wants to eat. And then if they do eat, they may not make the best choices. And then they're nauseous or things like that. So that's the main thing. What else? Overdoing it is the second thing. I mean, some people have that adverse effect where they're not really sleepy, and the next thing you know, they're giving me a tour of their, garden, and it's like, no, we can't do that. So I would say overdoing it and not eating are the two main things. And then the pickers, right? The people that are obsessed with the mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're looking at every single tree. They have a hard time just appreciating the forest for a while.
Right.
Yeah. So you mentioned TikTok and Instagram. You also mentioned kind of this like mental hurdle that you had to jump over to start putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel the same way. I feel like we're sisters from another life potentially when I hear you talk about some of your business decisions. And
Right. Yeah.
how did you get over that hurdle? Or like if you were mentoring yourself,
Yeah.
what advice would you give yourself several years ago?
I think I would just say, if my intention, I would tell myself, hey, just be well-intended. I think it was a lot easier for me to try and help than show, and this is no judgment on anybody else. This is just how I've done it. I don't want to show my morning, makeup routine, or, I don't share a lot of personal, because that is too much for me.
Yeah.
The judgment, and just, and I just think because I have now had so much exposure, I had to really rein that in. But I would say, I think that I just thought people can judge all they want. And, but my intentions are good. Going back to my company values, I'm authentic, I'm anticipating people's needs, and I'm very, very clear and openly making it palatable for, the lay people. And I'm just really dumbing it down, and I'm just trying to help. And I feel like if I come at it from that, I can handle the criticism. And sometimes people will say, the one I get all the time is, people shouldn't be using and it's just like, follow your surgeon's orders. This patient was told to use hydrogen peroxide, so this is what we're going to do, and it's going to be great. We're not, then I want to say, we're not pouring hydrogen peroxide in an open wound, but I just calm. Yeah. So sometimes I look back and I don't even know how I did it, because, and for all the people listening that are maybe trying to do something like this, I should mention that about a year and a half ago, I definitely felt I was in I hadn't set up all these kind of boundaries, and I hadn't set up autoresponders. So for example, if somebody messages me on Instagram, I have an autoresponder that says, email me, because that deflects. A lot of people won't take that step to email me. They just want to ask me a question. But if they email me, they have a better chance of kind of getting to me. But before I set all that up, I really was, I hate to use the word struggling, but I was struggling. I think I had built this business on being accessible, and I wanted people to reach out to me. And then I had so many people reaching out to me, I felt like I couldn't get off my couch. And then, getting recognized in airports, and it all felt very, I felt very vulnerable. I felt, it just
Out of control.
Oh,
it was out of control.
Out of control. And I've tried to explain that to people, and they're like, oh, it must be so hard when business is going good. But it was a thing. And I hate to say, but I actually felt like this isn't sustainable. I'm going to crack, So I definitely, something had to go. Well, and here's how I knew. I was considering shutting it all down and becoming a hospice nurse.
From plastic surgery to hospice. Wow, that is one wild swing.
Well, I had worked in home care, and I almost, before I started this business, I interviewed with hospice, and
yeah.
But and then I thought, the fact that I'm considering shutting this all down and daydreaming about just deleting all of it and going back to be a hospice nurse, I said, there has to be a middle way that I can manage this better. And then there's well, here's how most people do it, or here's what you got to do, right? The people, you got to do this, you got to hire people, and you got to have a team, and I don't want any of that. You
Yeah.
know, my goal in life is a beautiful life for me personally, is a beautiful life. And a part of me having a beautiful life is I have a calendar full of patients that I absolutely adore. And then when other people reach out to me, I respond with love and kindness. And then I have a lot of people that reach out that sometimes I can't get back to. And I just do my best and get back to why, this, I thought this about a year ago. Why did I even start this to begin with? It was the volunteer work. So time to get back to that, and which has been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. To be more intentional about your priorities and your time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask one selfish question
Ooh, okay.
because I am a surgeon that's younger, earlier in my career. What advice would you give to me in terms of growing our business and providing the best patient care that myself and our team can give?
I think, well, first of all, I think just the fact that you're asking that question is huge. I think your team is everything. I think I would be super intentional and about your social media as far as thinking about your ideal patient. I think if you make your decision based on them, that's going to be super helpful. I think, let's see. Have you ever done that work? There's a lot of work about your client avatar or things like that.
It is interesting when I was talking to you earlier and you said, you always go back to your company values. And for me, what I've told myself as I've grown the business and we've grown a patient base is what's on brand. If
Yes,
it's not on brand, then we shouldn't do it.
right.
And so I totally agree with that sentiment. It's like, what is my dream vision for both me personally and the business as a whole and our team? And if it doesn't align with that,
Right.
then it's not right.
Right. And I think that, so I love that. And I even have names. So I have two kind of ideal clients. I have the person that's going to hire me. And then I have the person that's going to, buy my ebook or buy my course that can't necessarily work with me because I'm not available or they can't afford me or whatever. And they're two different women and they have a name and I know what kind of purse they carry, what they're talking about with their girlfriends, where they're vacationing. If anybody's listening to this and saying, how does she know that? I've pictured it, thought about it, journaled about it, and so on brand. And I would take it even a step further. And for your staff's sake, because here we're having this conversation, but for every person on your staff is, Mary or Julie, does this speak to her? And it's for
Mhm.
this fictitious person. How would Mary feel about this? Does Mary want the, you know, pre-op orders or, beforehand, after, all these different things? For example, this is just a very, very specific detail. I just had a patient, and while I was dropping her off, the nurse said, okay, we're going to call in your pain medications. And so I thought to myself, and I understand sometimes they don't want patients taking them ahead of time, and I get it. But also, what if the care person can't go pick them up? Then there's so all these little touch points, how does that
Mhm.
affect Mary or whoever your avatar is? And I think that helps you really keep things on brand, but even more kind of more micro, really specific. How does that resonate with her? Is that best for her? Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, that is super helpful. Okay, so let's wrap things up a bit. You have mentioned your online resources that are available for patients who maybe don't use you personally, but are able to use your huge breadth of expertise and your recommendations. So I know they're on your website, but tell us how people can get a hold of you, how they can get your ebooks, how they can subscribe to your newsletter.
Yes, thank you. So my website is kellygreytok.com. And of course, I'm on all the socials. These days, a lot of surgeons are kind of keeping me for their VIPs. And of course, I do a lot of international patients that come here for surgery, which is a lot of fun. But I also do last minute stuff too. So I have, you know, ebooks and video courses that walk people through, like, this is what I do with my, you know, this is what I do with my private patients. And so they can, you know, it's funny because people think it's for them, the patient. It's mostly for their caregiver, because it just walks their caregiver through. Like, I get emails from all the husbands. Oh, that was a godsend, or thank you for that, or this or that. And it just helps them know how to show up and what to really do and what not do to support their person. So those can be found at my, you know, the link in my bio on all my socials, and then my website. I also, if you don't mind, would love to mention, so I feel it's important to have a passion project. And
Yeah.
when I started this business was because I wanted to do more mission work. And even though I love to travel and I'm excited to be able to do more of those trips, I love, when I was a home care nurse, I took care of a lot of patients, breast cancer patients, breast reconstruction patients, or patients just genetically testing.
I'm looking at this right now. Yes, I love this.
Yeah, and so I created a video course walking patients going through mastectomy through the most important things to do that first week. You know, and if you were to watch it, I mean, it's a no-brainer, I think, for us, but it is everything to people, and it's more for the caregivers. And so I launched this for Breast Cancer Awareness Month in 2024, and I've already had hundreds of people sign up for it. It's totally free. And when I say free, I'm not following up with an email where I'm trying to get them to buy something. Like, it's just free. And I could get emotional. It just it's why I became a nurse.
Yeah.
I'm at a loss for words. I love it. And, you know, when I had my sister, I have an identical twin, and she helped me do it. So she's kind of the patient. And it was really good because there were some times when she asked questions, and I tried to keep it kind of not scripted, because there were a few times she would be like, why are we doing it that way? Which you know, from her perspective, it was great to have her interaction. And then I would answer the question for her and for the viewer. So that's available. And so if anyone listening to this, I hope no one does, but until we find a cure, people are going to listen to this, and we all know somebody that's been affected by breast cancer. So this is a great, great resource.
Well, to end on a little bit of a positive note, tell us a couple goals you have for this upcoming year.
Ooh, well, you know, I'm not a big goal setter, actually, which is a little different. I'm trying to not overwork. I'll tell you that.
That's a goal, to
There
set
you
some
go.
boundaries. Yeah.
Try not to overwork. You know, actually, I will say this. Because I launched the mastectomy course, video course, for breast cancer month, I didn't have a chance to get a lot of like publicity for it. So I'm really hoping to be on some podcasts this year, some you know, breast cancer podcasts, just to kind of get the free resource out. So that's something that's on my to-do list. So, and I would love to go internationally to recover a patient. We'll see. I think that'd be fun.
Well, Kelly, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time today. For anyone listening, her website really has a huge breadth of information. So she has a page on there about the free mastectomy course. She also has recovery courses that you can take specific to facelift and then breast and body work. She also has ebooks that, I love the name of it. It's the Perfect Facelift Recovery ebook, which is a great primer to kind of get people prepared. And then if they're able to, you know, reaching out to you and having your one-on-one care. So thank you again, Kelly, so much. And I wish you all the success in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Umstattd. It was great talking with you. I appreciate it.